everyone. So to get us started, last summer I went with some friends to Canada and we were backpacking around Banff, back when we could go places before COVID. On our first day of our backpacking trip, we came across this sign. Sorry if it's kind of hard to see. We were trying to get to Sunshine Village. Unfortunately for us, everything in Canada is in kilometers. Like most countries, they use the metric system, not miles like we're used to. So let me zoom in a bit on that. Here's a zoomed in version. We're trying to get to Sunshine Village. It was 22.5 kilometers or kilometers away. And so the question was, are we gonna make it? Can we make it there in a day? We weren't entirely sure. We did not really know the kilometer to mile ratio, but we figured it out. We're gonna come back to this problem in a second, but I just wanted to show you that as something to have in the back of your mind, because this is what we're gonna be doing today. All of Unit 1 is basically about conversions. So if you have various units, you have various measurements, what might those look like and how might we transform them? You're going to be doing some similar stuff in physics right now, so this will go well with that. We measured lots of things, so go ahead and pause the video right now. That last example was about length, so like kilometers is a length, but there are many other things that we can measure. So pause the video and think about what are some other things that we measure. I feel like Dora the Explorer right now. All right, so here are some ideas. These are some things that I've thought of. There are many others, but these are just some examples of various things that we can measure. We're going to primarily focus on these first four, just because they're fairly common, measuring length, weight, volume, time, but of course there are many other things that we can measure. And each one of these usually has many different ways you can measure it. For example, with length, we've got the metric system and we have the standard system. With angles, you have different ways to measure angles. With temperature, you've got Celsius and Fahrenheit, so even within these, you have some variation. Hence the need for conversions. I want to show you these because I just think they're interesting. If you ever want to approximate some of these measurements, here are some ideas. An inch is approximately a paper clip or the diameter of a quarter. A foot is basically like a foot. A yard is like a yardstick. It's about the width of a wide doorway. And then if we think about a mile, that's about the length of a runway. I felt like that was really long, but I actually looked it up, and a runway, turns out, is usually about 6,000 to 8,000 feet. So that's actually over a mile, which feels crazy long. When we talk about weight, in our standard system, we might measure a car in tons. That's pretty big. A pound is like maybe a book, and then an ounce would be like some coins. When we talk about volume, when you can think of a gallon, you could think of like a gallon of milk. A quart might be like a quart of oil or a pint of water. A cup is literally like a measuring cup. And then fluid ounces are very small. All right, so you should have a unit conversions handout, either on Google Classroom or a physical copy. I gave you that just kind of as reference, but you need to have those memorized. They're not on your formula sheet. It's something that you're gonna need to look over these and study. Just to be honest, these come up more than you think, so it's good to have these memorized. So for example, you'll probably know most of these. 12 inches in a foot, 3 feet in a yard, and then this one can throw people off sometimes, 5,280 feet in a mile, and you do need to have that one memorized. The way I've often heard people memorize this one is they say it's 5 tomatoes. So like, there's a 5 tomatoes, because it sounds like 5,280, 5 tomatoes, I don't know, that helps some people. We'll talk about metric system in a minute, but this is the standard system. So this is what we use typically in the United States, although we do use metric as well. For weight, we usually talk about pounds, and there are 16 ounces of the pound, 2,000 pounds in a ton. And for volume, which is like how much can something hold, you've got 8 fluid ounces in a cup, 2 cups in a pint, 2 pints in a quart, 4 quarts in a gallon. And so all of these conversion rates are going to help us as we work through some problems here in a second. The hardest one for me to remember is this one, honestly. 8 fluid ounces in a cup. And I will tell you, I was making soup just the other day, and I was in the store, and the recipe was in cups, but I needed fluid ounces because that's what the package said in the store, and I actually had to Google this because I forgot. So it would be helpful to you if you had these memorized. So for example, if I want to convert 1.6 miles to inches, I like to write down what I'm starting with, so 1.6 miles. And then I often like to write down what my end goal is. So my end goal is to be in inches. Then I'm going to need at least 1, maybe 2 or 3 steps to get there. And so I don't know the conversion rate, like I don't know how many inches are in a mile. But what I do know is how many feet are in a mile. So I could go from miles to feet, and then from there I could go feet to inches, because I know this conversion rate and I know this conversion rate, and so if I combine all that together, I'll get there. So by conversion rate, we literally multiply this original amount by whatever conversion rate we need. In this case, if I'm going miles to feet, how many feet are in a mile? Remember that that's, where'd it go? 5,280 feet in a mile. 520. Oh goodness. All right, so what I'm gonna do is put that conversion rate right here. And what you need to happen is, if miles is on top right here, I need to put miles on the bottom for my conversion factor, because what I'm going to do is, there's 5,280, 1 mile. What I'm going to do is multiply this amount by the conversion rate, and that'll turn it into feet. And the reason this works is because miles is on top and on the bottom, canceling each other out, leaving me in just feet. Oftentimes people want to know, like, why is this a legal move? Like, why am I allowed to do this? The reason is 5,280 feet is equivalent to a mile. And remember, if you divide anything by itself, like let's say I have 5 divided by 5, that's just a 1. So anytime you have something divided by itself, it's actually just a 1. And so these look different, but they're actually the same amount. And so anything divided by itself is technically just a 1. And so if I multiply this by a 1, I'm not changing it at all. I'm not changing the amount, I'm just changing the units on the amount. All right, so at this point I'm in feet, but I need to get to inches. So I'll need to multiply by another conversion rate. I know that there are 12 inches in 1 foot. The reason I put feet on the bottom and not inches on the bottom is, again, because I need to line these up kind of diagonally. Feet and feet need to cancel, leaving me in inches. And so now I've got everything set up, and I just need to grab my calculator and do a little math here. These are just fractions. Anytime you have fractions, like let's say I had 1/3 times 4 times 2/5. Anytime you have fractions, just a refresher, the way you multiply them is you multiply across the top. 4 times 1 times 2 is 8. And you multiply across the bottom. This is technically over 1. 1 times 3 times 5 is 15. So that's how you multiply fractions. These are just fractions. That's all they are. So we'll multiply this times this times this, and get I need more room. 101,376 inches. And then on the bottom we've got 1 times 1, which is just 1. So this divided by 1 is just 101,376 inches. That is a lot of inches. Make sure you have units on your final answer. If you need to pause, if you need to rewind, go back, send me a question, anything like that, feel free. All right, let's get into volume a little bit. With volume, I have included this on your handout. This kind of helps me remember how much is in these, because these are hard to remember sometimes. There's 2 cups in a pint and 2 pints in a quart. And quart sounds like quarter, so there's 4 quarts in a gallon, like 4 quarters in a dollar. Here's an example of using Mr. Gallon Man here. If I want to convert 2.8 gallons to pints, again, I'm going to start with what I'm given, and then I ultimately need to get to pints. You may know how many pints are in a gallon. It's 8. So really you would just need to multiply it by 8, and that's fine. If you forgot, you could go gallons to quarts and then quarts to pints. Either way, you should get the same answer. So if I want to go gallons to quarts, I know that in 1 gallon, there's 4 quarts. And again, I put gallons down here so that those will cancel. And then I can go quart to pint. I know there are 2 pints in every quart. So again, once you've got to where you want to go, in this case pints, multiply across the top, multiply across the bottom. So when I multiply across the top, I get 22.4 pints. And then 1 times 1 is just 1, so we can leave it there. If on any of these problems you feel like you can just figure it out, you don't need to set up the conversion factors, you can figure out what to multiply or divide by, that's fine. Feel free to just do that. It does get a little more complicated later on, so I would encourage you to be able to set up these conversion factors. Also, sometimes on the EOC, it'll be like a drag and drop problem, and they'll have like this set up, but they'll leave some of these blank, and you have to like fill in the blanks. I've seen that before. So just know that you're gonna want to know how to do this, even if that's not the way that you normally do it. And that's okay if you can figure it out other ways, totally fine. All right, I'm gonna pause. The next video will be about the metric system.